What if I told you the fastest boats ever built weren't pulled off the market because they broke down, but because they worked exactly as designed? Today, we're counting down 5 speedboats and racing hulls that got banned outright, and the brutal reasons officials finally pulled the plug. Number 5 is the pickle fork unlimited hydroplane. In the late 1970s, hydroplane builders figured out that a forked cab-forward hull cut through the air cleaner than anything racing before it, and unlimited hydroplanes started clearing 200 miles on the straights. The shape was a genuine breakthrough. It was also a wing that nobody had bothered to test for what happens when a wing gets airborne on purpose. Wind tunnel data existed for the hull's straight-line performance long before anyone ran serious tests on what it would do the moment the front end lifted off the water, and by the time that gap in the research mattered, drivers were already racing at 200 mph. The pickle fork design let air get trapped underneath the sponsons at speed, and once the nose lifted even slightly, the whole boat launched off the water and came down on its back. 2 of the sport's biggest stars died in these hulls within a year of each other in the early 1980s, and the deaths happened close enough together that the American Powerboat Association stopped pretending it was bad luck. Enclosed survival capsules became mandatory, and the raw pickle fork shape that caused it was effectively legislated out of the sport for good. Engineers who worked on the redesign later admitted the aerodynamics had genuinely outpaced anyone's ability to predict what the hull would do once it left the water, which is a strange thing to build a race car for. That's 5 boats down, and the racing world was just getting started on banning things. Number 4 looked tame by comparison, right up until it started flipping people backward with the cockpit still open. Number 4 is the open cockpit Formula One tunnel boat. Before enclosed cockpits existed in tunnel boat racing, drivers sat exposed in a hull, skimming on a cushion of trapped air between 2 sponsons, the same basic trick that makes tunnel boats fast and the same trick that makes them want to fly. At full throttle, a gust of wind or a bad wave under the tunnel could lift the nose just enough for the whole boat to somersault, and with no capsule and no restraint system built for a rollover, drivers were being thrown clear or crushed on impact. The physics were almost identical to what happened with the hydroplanes years earlier. A hull light enough to go fast was also light enough to fly, and nobody had built the tunnel boat class with that lesson already learned. After a run of fatal accidents through the late 1980s, the sport's governing body made the closed survival cell mandatory for every boat on the grid, essentially banning the open cockpit hull overnight. Teams that didn't retrofit simply stopped racing. The tunnel hull design that made these boats terrifyingly fast never went away. The boats that let you sit in one with nothing around you did. Drivers who raced both eras described the difference in almost casual terms: less afraid of losing, more afraid of simply not walking away, which tells you everything about why the rule change happened as fast as it did. If you've never heard of a canard on a boat before, you're about to understand exactly why it got outlawed. Number 3 is the winged Class 1 offshore catamaran. Offshore catamaran racing in the 1990s hit a wall. Teams had already maxed out horsepower, so builders started bolting small aircraft-style wings called canards onto the front of the sponsons to generate lift and cut drag at speed. It worked. It also meant that once a canard-equipped catamaran caught the wrong wave at 100+ mph, the same lift that made it fast started peeling the whole hull off the water in a blowover nobody could recover from. Unlike a monohull losing traction, a catamaran going airborne at that speed had almost nothing to stabilize it once it left the surface, which turned a design advantage into a coin flip every time the water got rough. Officials in the sport eventually banned canards outright, ruling that the aerodynamic advantage created a level of danger the racing itself was never designed to survive. Teams went back to bare sponsons. Lap times got slower. Nobody in the pits argued with the trade-off. The teams who'd invested the most in canard research were also the ones who pushed hardest for the ban, once they'd seen up close exactly how little warning a crew got before a blowover became unrecoverable. If stories like this are your thing, digging up the exact moment a design went from record-breaking to outlawed, that's genuinely all this channel does. So hit subscribe now so the next one lands in your feed instead of getting lost. Okay, back to the list. Number 2 didn't get banned by a racing federation at all. It got banned because it was too easy to steal, too easy to hide, and too easy to disappear in. Number 2 is the unmarked drug runner Deep V. Through the late 1970s and 80s, smugglers along the Florida coast were buying stripped-down offshore Deep V hulls, the same raw, no-frills shape that made a boat fast in a straight line, and stretching them out with extra fuel tanks and blacked-out running lights to outrun the Coast Guard in the dark. The boats themselves weren't illegal. What made them lethal was that they were being driven flat out at night with no radar, no lights, and no experience handling a hull that could snap sideways at speed the second the water got rough. The Coast Guard and Customs eventually pushed through registration and lighting requirements specifically targeting unmarked high-speed hulls, effectively banning the exact stripped-down configuration smugglers depended on. The hull shape lived on in legitimate racing boats. The invisible, unmarked version of it does not exist on the water today. Coast Guard crews from that era described the calculus bluntly. A boat running dark at 70 mph with no running lights wasn't just breaking the law. It was one bad wave away from a collision nobody would even see coming until it was already over. And that brings us to the boat every ban on this list was really building toward, because the officials who wrote these rules were reacting to bodies in the water, and the last one is the deadliest example of why. Number 1 is the unlimited class offshore race boat of the early 1980s. Before modern offshore racing added mandatory canopies, kill switches, and speed limits by class, the unlimited category let builders put as much engine as physically possible into the lightest hull they could design, with essentially no safety requirement beyond a life jacket. Boats were topping 140 mph in open water, with drivers sitting fully exposed above the deck. The results were exactly what you'd expect. Multiple fatal accidents throughout the early 1980s. Drivers thrown from boats at speeds that gave them no chance, hulls disintegrating on impact with nothing engineered to protect the people inside. The sport's own governing bodies eventually banned the unlimited class in its original open form entirely, replacing it with speed-restricted categories and mandatory survival equipment that still define offshore racing today. The boats that existed before that ban don't race anymore because the sport decided nobody should be allowed to build one again. Everything that followed on this list, the canopies, the canard bands, the kill switches, traces back to officials finally admitting that raw speed without a single engineered safeguard was never a sport. It was a countdown. 5 designs that were fast enough to win and dangerous enough to get outlawed by the very officials running the sport. Every single ban on this list came after the fact, not before it, which is the uncomfortable pattern running through the entire history of speedboat racing. The engineering always outran the rulebook, and the rulebook only ever caught up once someone had already paid for that gap with their life. Which ban surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if this kind of story gets you, click the video on your screen right now for another one just like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.